afternoon. You're watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jes Delos Santos. The country's balance of payments swung to a deficit in January. Data from the Bangko Sentral show that last month's balance of payments stood at a shortfall of $752 million. That's a turnaround from a $4.23 billion surplus in December last year. The central bank said the deficit in January reflected outflows mainly from the foreign currency withdrawals of the national government from its BSP deposits. The withdrawals were used to pay the government's foreign currency debts. However, the BSP said the outflows were partially offset by inflows from the central bank's forex operations and income from overseas investments. All right, like what we reported earlier today, markets closed for the 35th anniversary of EDSA People Power Revolution. Again, the index tumbled as it closed yesterday, that's Wednesday, ending Wednesday down by close to a 0.9% to 6,755.95. That as uncertainties persist over the prospect of the government's vaccine rollout, but that might just get some clarity. The palace has said earlier in the day that Sinovac's Coronavax COVID-19 shots will arrive on Sunday. That comes from the 600,000 doses of donations from Beijing. Chinese ambassador to the Philippines has confirmed this as well. Now, Roque said inoculation could begin as early as March 1, with personnel from the Philippine General Hospital receiving the first doses. Although health authorities have said in the past that it's not recommended for high-risk health workers. Let's see if this will be the impetus that investors are looking for to actually lift sentiment in the local bourse. But over in Asia, it's a sight for sore eyes. It's green all over the region, with indices rallying as investors zero in on the prospects of a better than projected recovery, as well as the Fed's vow of prolonged support. Hong Kong, in fact, outperforming here. As you can see, Hang Seng is up by 1 0.6%. Japanese shares also ended Thursday in the green here. Nikkei is edging higher by 1 0.7%, as well as the topics which has advanced at least 1 2/10%. Korean stocks also, if you can see here, get this, up by 3.5%. Aussie stocks as well closing the day up by 0.8%. Now, gains in the region pacing the increase in U.S. futures after the S&P 500 capped off session higher despite weakness among tech shares here. The Dow Jones, S&P 500, and the Nasdaq all on the upside, at least the futures all on the upside here, as you can see in the upper portion of this chart. Now, let's zoom in once again on the local bourse as we focus on Aboitiz Equity Ventures. Now, you have Bloomberg citing sources saying that the conglomerate is considering letting go of a minority stake in animal feeds unit Pilmico Foods. That's about 20 to 30% of the business. Sources say the transaction could value the entire business at more than $1 billion. Deliberations are ongoing, and the companies could actually go against the deal. Recall that yesterday, Aboitiz Equity ended lower by 0.8% to 43 pesos and 45 centavos a share. Let's see how that will affect the stock's performance as trading resumes tomorrow. Now, vaccine passports are being touted by some political and business leaders in the world as a way to revive international travel. And in the Philippines, the tourism department is supporting proposals for a vaccine passport, saying this would help build travel confidence.
Against COVID-19, political and business leaders are talking about vaccine passports as a way to try and get life back to normal. Here's what you need to know. So what's the idea behind vaccine passports? There's a lot of people out there, including governments that rely on tourism, who want global travel to resume, and they want it to resume as safely as possible. So there are a lot of people out there that think vaccine passports are the way to make that happen. At the moment, a lot of countries and airlines require you to show proof that you haven't been infected with COVID-19 before you land, but there's no global standard and regulations vary from place to place. The idea of a vaccine passport would be to create and provide travelers with an updated, modern version of the yellow card that tracks your inoculations over time. That would allow border agents, immigration, airlines to all have proof that you were vaccinated before traveling and have some kind of modern digital system where those things can even be verified ahead of time. So who's actually developing vaccine passports? There's a number of initiatives out there. There are some being pushed by international travel organizations that would help airlines and border agencies integrate the different requirements for different travelers around the world related to COVID-19. There's some from the World Economic Forum, which is working on the Commons project, which hopes to have a sort of smartphone-based digital app that would have a sort of global standard proving that you had been vaccinated. And there's other ones like Israel's Green Passport, and there's one in the UK that would integrate with the National Health Service. There's only a handful of private companies that are saying they require proof of vaccination. UK-based Saga Cruises is saying that people will need vaccine proof before they're allowed on their ships. There's also Qantas Airways, the Australian airline, whose CEO said that at some point in the future they do hope to only be flying people who have been vaccinated. But at the moment, it's still a bit controversial. You know, people are a little bit cautious to say we're going to limit people by a vaccine or by vaccination. While the WHO does not recommend vaccine passports at the moment, they've previously recommended against immunization passports, which would prove that the bearer has some kind of antibodies against COVID. But they basically recommend against these passports for two reasons. One is that people who have been vaccinated can still carry COVID, so they could still technically spread it. And the second thing is that vaccines are in short supply. So if you offer vaccine passports to people who've been vaccinated, not everyone's going to be able to get one because vaccines are limited both by how much your government buys and within each country who's being given the shot yet. There's been a lot of research over the course of the global pandemic that's shown COVID-19 has really hit communities of color hard. It's hit informal sector workers in the developing world. It's really just had an unequal impact across the world and really exacerbated existing inequalities that were already out there. Some worry that vaccine passports could effectively create a sort of new global elite of vaccinated travelers who are free to cross borders, while other people who aren't as lucky or who happen to live in poorer countries may be disadvantaged or further disadvantaged as a result of not having access to one of these vaccine passports.
Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. Various industry groups are still pushing for the shift to a modified general community quarantine as soon as possible. The Philippines Star reports that representatives from the retail, hotel, and IT BPM sectors believe the easing of lockdowns paired with intensified vaccine efforts should spur quicker economic recovery. The Philippine Retailers Association said the country is lagging behind its neighboring countries and that the only way forward is to reopen. IBPAP, on the other hand, says Filipinos already have a high level of consciousness in following health safety protocols enough to ease restrictions to a minimum. President Duterte earlier said there will be no shift to MGCQ pending vaccine rollout in the country. Malacanang says a first batch of 600,000 Sinovac doses will arrive in the country on Sunday. Now, more from the Philippine Star. The central bank says an ongoing shift to a cash-light economy could accelerate recovery for the Philippines. BSP Governor Ben Jokno said moving to a cashless society would have an impact of more than 3 percentage points on the GDPs of emerging countries like the Philippines. The Bangko Sentral recently formed a new payments and currency management department headed by newly appointed Deputy Governor Mamerto Tangonan. The new deputy governor says among his first order of business is to launch new digital channels that would facilitate person-to-merchant payments as well as a one bills payment facility. E-commerce has chipped in 4.3% to the country's GDP after it saw an unprecedented boom during the pandemic. But do local enterprises have enough support to effectively navigate the digital landscape? To talk about that and how they're helping on that front, we have straight from India, Anchanto COO and Philippine country head Abhimanyu Kashikar. Good afternoon, Abhi.
Hi, Jes. Very good afternoon.
All right. So, just to give us an idea first, how much of a growth have you seen in the past year when it comes to the digital shift among Philippine enterprises?
I think it is tremendous. The initial part of the COVID pandemic situation, initial 2 to 3 months were really impacting everyone. But I think after that, when it took off, it was really amazing to see that a lot of enterprises, a lot of businesses, SMEs, retailers, they are getting into e-commerce and they want to expand their offerings to various different buyers through an online channel. So I think this was really tremendous for us to see. In fact, we were not expecting a huge growth due to pandemic, but I think e-commerce made it really happen for a lot of us.
Can you nuance this a bit and give us an idea, really, how much of a growth was that, if you have numbers?
Okay, so in terms of very specifically for Philippines, we actually grew almost around 180% during the last 3 quarters of the last year of 2020. So which was compared to the previous year. So it itself shows that the e-commerce boom that we are seeing in the country.
Is majority of the ecosystem still mostly coming from MSMEs, or are we also seeing a growing interest among legacy businesses?
So legacy businesses earlier they were not very much tuned for e-commerce. In fact, lot of things what happens is a lot of legacy businesses or traditional businesses, they are not aware of how to start e-commerce, how to get into it, what is important, whether it is technology that is important, whether it is the operations that is important. But now through the process, I think the traditional businesses are also getting to understand the e-commerce business strength. They are moving towards that. For example, we last year signed LGS, which is again a 40-year-old traditional business, and then they were able to transition into e-commerce using our platform. So that kind of helped them to not only fine-tune their processes operationally, but also use the technology for this expansion. As well as there are SMEs and MSMEs that we are seeing a huge growth in terms of having this transition from the traditional trade to e-commerce. In fact, some of them are also looking for cross-border e-commerce now.
Mm-hmm. But what do you think were the major challenges holding back firms from actually fully making that shift to going digital?
I think first is the digital literacy, right? So information and communication technology education, that is very, very important for the MSMEs or for the SMEs. That is the foremost thing that I believe is very important for them. The second is how to actually start into e-commerce. A lot of businesses today also are not aware that how they can approach, how they can start. Some of them, they want to start their web store, but is it the right policy? Is it the right approach? I think a very, very strategic approach is important. Traditionally, I mean, in Southeast Asia, we have seen that the marketplaces are driving a lot. So why not piggyback on their marketing efforts? Let's approach first to the marketplaces like Lazada, Shopee, Quten, etc., and start selling there. So I think digital literacy, the understanding and education on the ICT front, information and communication technology, and more in terms of how technology can help these businesses to fast pace their e-commerce expansion.
Okay. Now, Abby, how long do you see this boom extending? Especially now, there's a bit of a semblance of normalcy, especially with a lot of countries already expecting vaccines. Some in fact, even in the region, have already rolled out their COVID-19 shots. In the Philippines, how long do you see this extending, this boom when it comes to e-commerce?
Okay, see, I think the whole vaccination program will go on for maybe six months to 1 year, depending on the country and the population size, right? So in every other countries around the world. Very specific to Philippines, I think since a lot of businesses have now understood the importance of e-commerce, I think this is going to pick up really fast. I believe that it will not stop. It will still continue to grow for the next couple of years to come. I would say that it will definitely grow in multiples of 2 to 3x in the next 2 years.
All right, that's quite a lot. But the thing is, while they're expecting that growth, everyone's going to be jumping on the bandwagon as well. How can MSMEs set their digital play apart?
Correct. So what happens is, as I was mentioning, for them, the strategic approach is very important, right? So they should not end up in getting into everywhere and following the crowd. I think it is important for MSMEs to know that what is their strength, whatever products they are selling, what is the category which makes sense on which particular channels, and tap onto those channels to start selling and basically basically pushing their assortment on these different channels. I think that is very important for the MSMEs. So technology definitely will help. Second, I believe as we speak, lot of retail businesses are also looking for e-commerce expansion. So what will gradually happen? This will shift into omni-channel solutions as well. However, I believe for now the MSMEs need to focus on their strength first. They need to get well educated. For that, I think a lot of retail associations and non-profit organizations are doing a lot for that in the Philippines. So that is one. They should know that which product and which category sell where. That's the second, and how they can maintain that difference. Because what happens now is with e-commerce, the middlemen are cut, and the manufacturers can directly straight up connect with the buyers, right? So they need to maintain the quality. They need to maintain the decent margins for them to survive as well.
All right, so it's all about getting informed first and then knowing as well the options, technological options available for your businesses. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Anchanto's COO and Philippine country head, Abhimanyu Kashikar. Thank you, Abhi.
Thank you, Jess. It was a pleasure being here.
And those are the biggest news on the business and economic front today, February 25, 2021. Catch Business World Live again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News.